Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. A crown of gold leaves rests on a shaking head. It looks delicate, regal. The cameras zoom in as it's lowered onto bloody hair, or tangled braids, or Finnick's sea-soaked curls. The Capitol calls it a reward, a symbol that you've beaten the Hunger Games. But here's the real question. What does it actually cost to wear that crown for the rest of your life? At face value, the answer sounds simple. You win, you live. You get money, a house in Victor's village, immunity from the reaping, and your whole district gets extra food and celebrations. The Capitol sells you this clean equation: survive the arena, retire in comfort. Game over. Roll credits. So why do the victors who made it look so destroyed when the cameras cut away? You think about Finnick's rope of knots. On TV, it's a quirky habit, a charming tick for the Capitol audience. But once you know about the years of forced prostitution, those knots start to look less cute and more like a lifeline. You picture Haymitch's mansion in District 12, every luxury he could want, and he drinks himself into oblivion on a couch, surrounded by empty bottles. Katniss gets the grand tour of her new home, full pantry, hot water, a warm bed, and still wakes up screaming from nightmares. If this is winning, why does it feel so much like a different version of punishment? Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. They just change shape. Now your arena is a talk show couch, a victory tour train, a private party you can't refuse. You're exempt from coal mines or fishing boats, but you're not free. You mentor new tributes, you relive your trauma every year on live television, and the Capitol keeps a direct line into your house, into your schedule, into your body. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between that gold crown and the invisible chains that come with it. So here's the real question we're going to cover in this video. Is there actually any such thing as winning the Hunger Games? Or do victors just become a more expensive kind of prisoner with better furniture and worse nightmares? This is where we talk about contradictions the Capitol hopes you won't notice. The way Finnick's beauty hides his exploitation, the way Haymitch's big empty house echoes every tribute he couldn't save, the way Katniss's fame becomes the weapon Snow uses against her family. That part matters because it tells you the crown isn't an ending, it's a contract. So to really answer that question, we're going to cover every known victor story, from Lucy Gray in Snow's era, all the way to Katniss and Peeta. We'll pull apart the hidden details of the Capitol, and sometimes even the books, only hint at and see what their lives after victory reveal about the real purpose of the games. Because once you understand what happens to a victor after the arena, the crown on their head stops looking golden. It starts looking permanent. Why winning the games is the real death sentence. So if the crown is permanent, what exactly are you wearing? On paper, victory is the dream. Endless food, a warm bed, your family safe from the reaping, a big house in Victor's village where you never have to step into the mines or the factories again. At face value, it's the Capitol's ultimate promise. Survive the games, and you never have to play them again. But here's the real question. If winning is such a blessing, why do almost all the victors we meet look destroyed? Why is Hamish, who hasn't been reaped in decades, still drinking himself unconscious on that fancy couch in District 12? Why does Finnick O'Dare, the golden boy of District 4, have to trade secrets and his own body just to stay alive? Why is Johanna Mason so full of rage she can't stand anything pretty, to the point where the Capitol literally tortures her with water and trees? Any victor will tell you the games don't end at the cannon. They just change arenas. This is where we talk about the second arena, the tours, the parties, the cameras that never really turn off. You win, and immediately you're shipped out on a victory tour to parade through the districts that just watched their children die. You have to stand in front of grieving parents and sell them a story about honor and sacrifice. That part matters because it turns your trauma into the Capitol's best advertisement. Then come the Capitol parties, the mentoring, the direct line to Snow's office. If you're attractive or popular enough, there's a good chance you're pushed into prostitution for Capitol elites. The way Finnick and Johanna are. If you're difficult, you're monitored, threatened, or punished through the people you love. So why does anyone still believe this is freedom? And hanging over all of it is the quarter quell. Every 25 years, the rules change. Maybe your family has to watch you go back in. Maybe in the third quell, every existing victor suddenly realizes the fine print. You were never actually safe. Your name was never really out of the bowl. The games can reach into Victor's village anytime they want. Even the village itself is a weapon. We're going to cover the architecture later, but notice the pattern. It's always set apart, slightly elevated, with better power, better food, better everything. You're close enough that your district's children can see the reward, but far enough that no one forgets the line between them and you. There is a lot to uncover here about how that shapes your relationship to your own people. So if every victor ends up traumatized, addicted, or weaponized in a different way, what does that say about the real purpose of the games? And more importantly, what does it mean for all the victors we barely hear about? The ones whose stories were buried so completely, the Capitol must have been afraid of them. Because once we start digging into those missing lives, the whole system of victory begins to crack. Our angle tonight: every victor, every lie. So here's where we flip the board. If the whole system of victory is cracking, what if Victor's Village isn't a prize at all, but the crack itself? Winning the Hunger Games earns you a mansion, a steady income, and immunity from the reaping, on paper. But here's the real question. Why does the Capitol spend that much marble, electricity, and food on the handful of people who have already proven they can beat their games? The reason is simple and ugly. Victor's Village and the entire Victor system aren't rewards. They're tools. Tools of control, illusion, and propaganda, wrapped in silk sheets and fully stocked pantries. At face value, the promise is perfect. You survive the arena, your district showers you with roses, and the Capitol sends you home to a quiet street where the power never goes out. No more coal mines, no more fisheries, no more peacekeeper batons. Kids in your district look up at that hill and think, if I win, I get that. That part matters because it turns fear of the games into a twisted form of hope. But the reality: surveillance, sexual coercion, political leverage, permanent psychological warfare. Finnick O'Dare doesn't just win, he's sold. Johanna Mason refuses to sell, and the Capitol takes everyone she loves. Hamish is watched, isolated, and slowly drunk into usefulness. Even Katniss, in her perfect little District 12 house, is never alone. Every phone call, every visitor, every hunting trip is another data point for Snow. So this is where we talk about our angle tonight. We're going to cover every known victor not just as a name on a games roster, but as a resident or intended resident of this system. How were they made in the arena? How were they used once the cameras cut away? And what happened when they tried to step outside their assigned role? Chronologically, we'll move from the prehistory of Lucy Gray and the 10th Games, where Snow first learns how image, romance and spectacle can manufacture a victor, all the way to Katniss and Peter, whose presence in Victor's village literally survives the bombing of District 12. Thematically, we'll track careers from Districts 1, 2, and 4 who were bred to want that mansion, outliers like Beatty and Weiress, whose talents become capital weapons, and victors whose trauma turns them into quiet radicals. There is a lot to uncover here. Obscure early victors whose names barely survive, the missing years between Lucy Gray and the polished pageantry of the 10th, the quells that rewrote the rules, Haymitch's force field trick, the third quarter quell that reeked from the victors and shattered the promise of safety. And underneath all of that, we'll trace the hidden relationships, the unofficial resistance networks between victors, the way information and favors move through those 12 empty houses, and how their secret choices slowly undermine the capital. By the end of this, you won't just know the fates of every victor we can reasonably reconstruct. You'll see how their supposedly rewarded lives quietly set up the fall of Snow's world. So, let's start at the beginning. The first victors who went home with no village at all. Why did that change? And who paid the price when it did? The game plan. From Lucy Gray's song to Katniss's arrow, so to answer that, we need a map. Because if you just jump from Katniss back to some name on a quell plaque, it all turns into static. The pattern only shows up when you watch the victors the way Snow does, in order. First, we're going back to the origin era. This is where we talk about Lucy Gray, Snow's early career, and those primitive games that barely qualify as television. No victor's village, no stylists, half the time, no working arena. At face value, those winners just survive and disappear. But here's the real question. How does a girl who sings her way through the 10th Games become the prototype for the capital's entire romance and spectacle strategy? In that section, we're going to cover how early victors are basically test subjects. We'll track Snow learning that if you package a tribute with a story, you can sell cruelty as entertainment. We'll look at how Lucy Gray's songs, Sejanus's politics, and the chaos of those first arenas set the stage for the capital's later obsession with image. That part matters because it explains why, decades later, Katniss can't even shoot an arrow without someone in the capital asking what dress she's wearing. Then we move into the age of structure, the rise of the quarter quells, and the career system. This is where Districts 1, 2, and 4 start training kids from childhood, treating the games as a career path instead of a death sentence. We'll compare a career victor from 2 to someone from 11 or 12 and ask, what does it do to a district when their champions are groomed, not chosen by chance? Why does Glimmer's World produce volunteers while Rue's World prays never to hear its children's names? Here we'll break down how victors are trained, mentored, and then repurposed. Some become celebrities and propaganda tools. Some, like Finnick and Johanna, are turned into weapons and playthings for capital elites. Others, like Haymitch, are warnings, the drunk in the victor's village you're supposed to pity instead of question. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between each district and its champions, and how the capital quietly rewrites every victory to serve its own story. From there, we hit the modern era, the victors you know best. Katniss, Peter, Beatty, Weiress, Enobaria, Chaff, Cedar, Mags. We'll track them through the books and then stop to ask who actually exists on screen and who's just a face in the background. The novels give you whole interior lives, Haymitch's force field trick, Johanna's torture, Peter's prosthetic leg, and slow recovery in Victor's village. The films compress that, and in doing so, they quietly decide which victors matter, Why does it change the story when you never see Peter learning to walk again, or Katniss hiding out in an empty house while the fence hums? Near the end, we'll switch gears into speculation, using world-building clues, quell dates, capital commentary, the number of houses in each village. We're going to reconstruct the most likely stories of the unnamed victors. Who might have lived in those empty homes around Haymitch? What kind of victor does a district with coal or lumber or electronics actually produce? And what happens to them when the cameras go away? And finally, we'll close by circling back to that crown or token from the cold open. With every victor's story on the table, we'll ask one last question. Is there a single person in Panem who truly escapes the arena, or does the games follow every winner home, all the way to those quiet streets of the victor's village? That's the path. Now we can step into the first era and watch the very idea of a victor being invented in real time. Welcome to Victor's Village, the channel, not the mansion. So before we move through decades of victors and disappear into the archives, we should pause on something. Where are you in all of this? If you're new here, this channel treats Panem the way the capital treats a good arena. Every detail matters, every crack in the facade has a reason, and nothing is just set dressing. We go past the highlight reel. We ask why this district volunteers and that one starves, why a single rose on Snow's desk can say more than an entire propaganda broadcast. We're going to cover the victors tonight, but this is where we talk about the whole ecosystem that created them. On this channel, we've already broken down the quarter quells, traced Snow's rise from scholarship kid to serpent-in-chief, and mapped how each district's industry shapes its culture, its tributes, and its chances in the games. If you've ever wondered what a victor's village in District 4 smells like at dawn versus the coal dust silence of 12, that's the level we live at. Because at face value, the story is simple. Win the games, move to the mansion, live in peace. But here's the real question. What happens when you zoom in on the contract hidden under that promise? The mentoring obligations, the propaganda tours, the phone that can ring from the capital at any hour. There is a lot to uncover here, and we don't do surface level. If you want more than Katniss volunteered to save Prim, and Snow is evil because poison, this is your Victor's Village. You move in by subscribing, and suddenly you're surrounded by people who will argue for 20 minutes about whether District 3's victors were already running a quiet resistance cell before the quarter quell. The relationship between you and the story shifts. You stop being a viewer of the games and start reading the control room. And I'll make you a promise. We keep the pacing tight. No filler, no 10-minute tangents about our breakfast in the sea. Each video is built as a fast, story-driven breakdown where every scene, every law, every offhand line from Snow is a clue. That part matters because the capital wins when the narrative feels foggy and slow. Clarity is rebellion. Quick pattern interrupt here. If you're worried this is going to turn into a dry history lecture, remember we're following careers, outliers, addicts, and revolutionaries through their actual lives. We're tracking why Finnick becomes a weapon, how Haymitch turns trauma into strategy, which victors the capital quietly fears. So, if you haven't yet, move into our version of Victor's Village and stay close. The tour is just getting started. Okay, let's step back in time before there even was a Victor's Village, to the girl whose song haunts the games forever, Lucy Gray Baird. Before there were victors, Lucy Gray and the prototype, before you ever get to a mansion on a hill, you have to start in a cage at the zoo. Back then, the games are barely a show. There's no Victor's Village, no stylists, no promise that your district will get extra grain if you win. The tributes are literally penned up with the animals, so capital citizens can stroll past, point, and decide who looks interesting. You don't get a chariot parade. You get a concrete floor and the smell of fear and manure. At face value, it's just cruelty, punishment for the dark days. But here's the real question. Why does Snow look at that mess and see potential? Why turn a crude execution into a story people can't stop watching? The early games are failing as propaganda. They terrify, but they don't hook. There is no reason for a child in District 12 to dream of the arena yet. This is where we talk about Lucy Gray Baird. She's not a career. She's a singer from District 12's Covey, dropped into the 10th Hunger Games with nothing except a rainbow dress and a voice that refuses to stay small. She performs at the reaping. She sings in the zoo cage. She turns the arena into a stage. And suddenly, one of these doomed children has a narrative, a relationship with the audience, a personality the Capitol can root for and argue about. Snow is technically her mentor, but really he's her first fan and her first analyst. He sees what happens when Lucy Gray leans into performance. Ratings spike, bets pour in, the games stop being background punishment and start becoming appointment viewing. There is a lot to uncover here, because this is the moment he learns the power of image, of romance, of curated hope. Their relationship is the prototype, the poor district girl and the ambitious Capitol boy. Secret meetings, shared songs, a sense that love might bend the rules of the arena. Sound familiar? Decades before star-crossed lovers from District 12 inches becomes a slogan, Lucy Gray and Snow are beta testing that script. That part matters because Snow watches how the Capitol reacts when a tribute becomes a character instead of a statistic. From there, you can draw a straight line to everything we're going to cover later. Victor's forced to perform talents on TV, Finnick turned into a celebrity weapon, Katniss and Peter's romance rehearsed and repeated until it sells. Lucy Gray is the first proof of concept that if you wrap death in music, costumes, and love stories, people will keep tuning in. So here's the real question. If Lucy Gray is the blueprint, how much of every later Victor's life is just the Capitol trying to recreate and control that same magic? When Snow builds Victor's village, is he rewarding winners or building a permanent stage for his Lucys who survived? Hold on to that, because next we're going to step into those empty houses and see exactly how that experiment plays out. Designing the Victor, Snow's big idea after the 10th Games. So when do those empty houses actually appear on the map of Panem? Right after the 10th Games. Right after Snow watches Lucy Gray turn a slaughter pen into a stage and realizes punishment alone isn't going to keep this thing alive. Back then, the games are barely a production. No stylists, no Victor's Village, no nationwide obsession, just starving districts, crumbling arenas, and kids shoved into a cage. You send them home on a train with nothing, if they even make it home at all. So why would anyone in any district ever cooperate? Why wouldn't they just wait for the whole system to collapse under its own cruelty? Here's the real question. How do you turn a public execution into a career path? Snow's answer is simple, but viciously smart. You don't just threaten people with the games. You sell them on the idea that winning could save them, not just from death, but from their entire life. That part matters because it shifts the emotional center of the games from pure fear to a twisted form of hope. So this is where we talk about Victor's Village. At face value, it's a reward. A mansion, full power, hot water, stocked pantries. In District 12, it's that weird, almost suburban ring of houses up on the hill, literally overlooking the scene. In richer districts, you can imagine glass front villas, imported Capitol tech, gardens that don't have to grow food because no one living there ever goes hungry again. On paper, it's the Capitol's promise made concrete. Your child wins. Your family never worries about tesserae mines or whips again. But here's the real question. Who is this actually for? Snow understands there are two audiences. For the Capitol, victors become celebrities. They're the faces on screens, the romantic leads in Caesar Flickerman's narratives, the proof that the games produce heroes instead of just corpses. For the districts, though, those same victors turn into walking billboards. Every time a kid in District 11 looks up at their own fenced-off victor's village, they're seeing an ad. The system can work for you too, if you play along. There is a lot to uncover here in the way placement does the psychological heavy lifting. Victor's villages sit apart from the main population, raised, cleaned, electrified. Children can see them, but not touch them. Victors are exempt from the worst labor, but now they live in a permanent reminder that their comfort is paid for by other children going into the arena. Snow's real insight is that fear isn't enough. If people only fear the games, they'll pray for them to end. If they half fear and half want to win, they'll start training their kids. That's the birth of the career districts, of volunteering, of parents who quietly measure their child's odds, instead of questioning the entire system. The relationship between victor and district becomes transactional. You bring us a champion, we'll bring you bread, a party, maybe an extra shipment of grain. We're going to cover how that little hope turns into a cage of its own, and how every victor who moves into those perfect houses discovers the one thing Snow never advertises. You can win the games and still never be free of them. How Victor's village hacks the human brain, and the cage has an address. Victor's village isn't just the nice part of town, it's a permanent monument to the games, built right on the edge of your vision. In most districts, it's a cluster of big, clean mansions set slightly apart from the main streets, with paved walkways, working streetlights, real glass windows. Always on the horizon, never on your ration card. You walk past mud, soot, and broken fences, and there it is, this pocket of impossible order. That part matters because it's not hidden in the capital. It's in your district, sharing your sky. You can't go inside, but you can see the chimneys, the gardens, the electricity that doesn't flicker. It's close enough to touch, and just far enough to remind you you'll probably never earn it. For a starving kid in District 12 or 11 or 10, those houses are proof that a different life exists at all. Here's the real question. When the only visible path out of misery is through an arena, what does that do to your brain? The games stop being just a death sentence and start to look at face value, like a twisted scholarship program. One lucky tribute gets a mansion, their family gets food, their district gets a party. So the story quietly shifts. It's no longer our children are being murdered for the capital's entertainment. It becomes one of our children might save us all. That is a brutal psychological pivot. Parents still fear the reaping, but they also whisper, what if it's our turn? Kids grow up rehearsing interviews in their head, the way Katniss imagines sponsors, or how Finnick becomes the golden boy of 4. Hope gets welded to horror. This is where we talk about social engineering. The victor moves into that mansion, and suddenly there's a literal wall between them and their old neighbors. They're exempt from the mines or the orchards. They have running water when everyone else is hauling buckets. Resentment creeps in. Is that still one of us? Or are they basically capital now? The relationship between victor and district fractures into envy, obligation, and performance. But then the victory tour rolls through, and the capital flips the script again. The same victor who eats alone in an oversized kitchen is paraded as district pride, draped in their industry's aesthetic, waving from a train. You're told to cheer for the person who survived your children's deaths. There is a lot to uncover here in how that whiplash keeps everyone emotionally off balance. And the capital is playing the long game. Over decades, those empty houses become a promise. You don't just produce tributes, you start producing volunteers. Careers in 1, 2, and 4 train their entire childhoods with those mansions in sight. Stepping forward because the house at the edge of town is calling their name. Even in districts where volunteering is rare, the idea is still there, humming in the background. So when that promise finally breaks in the third quarter quell, when victors themselves are reaped, it doesn't just threaten individuals. It detonates the entire psychological architecture of Victor's village. In the next section, we're going to cover what happens when the illusion of safety collapses, and why that's the moment victors stop being symbols and start becoming revolutionaries. From starving kids to career tributes. Volunteering by design, so if the illusion of safety can shatter in a single quarter quell card, why does the capital spend decades trying to make kids want the games in the first place? Why build a system that works best when you're not just accepting the reaping, you're stepping forward for it? At face value, volunteering looks merciful. You imagine an older sibling saving a younger one, or a district hero taking the place of someone weaker. But here's the real question. Why would a regime built on fear deliberately introduce choice into a process that was originally about total helplessness? Back in the earliest games, tributes were dragged in crying, half-starved, no training, no strategy, pure terror. So why the change? This is where we talk about design. The capital realizes pretty fast that terrified children dying badly is chaotic television. It's brutal, but it's not compelling. You can't sell stable control on panic alone. What you want are tributes who train, who care about winning, who understand the rules of the arena and still walk in. That part matters because once a tribute wants to win, they start cooperating with the narrative. They give interviews, they play romance. They fight harder, longer, in more cinematic ways. So over time, certain districts get a quiet promotion. Districts 1, 2, and eventually 4 are rewarded for treating the games as a career path. Training centers appear, officially sports academies, unofficially gladiator factories. Children grow up on replayed highlights of victors from their own streets. The mansion in Victor's village stops being a freak accident and becomes a family plan. You don't just get reaped and survive. You get groomed and then you volunteer. There is a lot to uncover here in how that culture builds. Parents in richer districts start calculating. If your kid is strong, charming, good with a sword, why not angle them toward the arena? The promise is enormous. Lifelong wealth, safety from future reapings for your family, prestige for your entire district. The capital leans in with sponsorships. Strong, entertaining tributes bring in gifts, medicine, weapons. Their districts get more screen time, more capital attention, more subtle privilege. The relationship becomes transactional. Give us good games, we give you hope. Compare that to the early raw years. Back then, you're a coal miner's kid, shoved into an arena you don't understand. Now, some tributes from 1 or 2 steps forward smiling, already branded with nicknames, convinced they can beat the arena and claim the mansion they've been walking past their whole lives. Marvel, Glimmer, Cato, Clove. These aren't accidents of the reaping, they're products. And the capital loves products. Products can be marketed, products can be replaced. So why is this volunteering machine so important for our victors? Because when you choose the games, the capital can argue you chose everything that came after. The trauma, the prostitution, the mentoring, the surveillance. If you raised your hand, how do you ever admit the system was rigged? And if the system works best when kids are volunteering to die, what does that mean for the ones who actually survive and have to live with the knowledge that they walked into the nightmare on purpose? In the next section, we're going to cover what that choice does to a victor's mind and why the capital quietly fears the day a career tribute finally regrets volunteering. District 12, the district that refused to play until it didn't. So if the capital's worst nightmare is a career tribute who starts regretting everything, what do you do with a district that never wanted to play in the first place? This is where we talk about District 12. In 12, the games aren't an opportunity. They're a weather event, something that happens to you. No training academies, no polished volunteers, no proud parents pushing kids toward glory. You stand in the square, you pray it's not your name, and if it is, everyone quietly assumes you're already dead. At face value, that sounds hopeless. But here's the real question. Why did the capital still build a full 12-house victor's village for a district that almost never produces a victor? We know of at least 2 winners before Katniss and Peter. There's Haymitch, of course, and then the ghost of an earlier victor implied by those extra empty houses on the hill. Someone came home to 12 before him. Someone old enough to be gone by the time Katniss is reaped. Their absence is the point. The capital built the infrastructure, made the promise of luxury, and then let time and poverty erase the person who proved it was technically possible. Haymitch is the exception that proves the rule. He wins the 50th games, the second quarter quell, in an arena wrapped in a force field. He figures out that using the field's rebound will kill the last career chasing him. It's clever, it's humiliating to the game makers, and it exposes that the arena itself can be turned against the capital. The capital cannot let that stand. So after the cameras stop, Snow has Haymitch's mother, brother, and girlfriend murdered. That part matters because it explains everything you see later. The alcoholism, the cynicism, the way he treats mentoring as both a job and a slow-motion breakdown. Now picture Victor's village in 12. 12 houses, 2 occupied, then 1, then 3 once Katniss and Peter return. Most of it is empty, overgrown, silent. The books really lean on how creepy that is. Full power, stocked kitchens, but no people. A whole suburb built for victors who never existed. It's both a failure report card for District 12 and a long-term threat. The message is, you could fill these if you tried harder. We're going to cover how that plays into Snow's strategy of hope later. But you can already see the relationship between architecture and control. And then Katniss breaks the pattern. She becomes the first volunteer from District 12, but not for fame, not for food, not for a mansion on the hill. She steps forward to save Prim. That single choice flips the capital's script on volunteering. Suddenly, the thing they wanted, kids choosing the games, is happening for the one reason they can't control. Love, not ambition. So what happens when a system built on fear and shallow hope has to confront a victor whose entire story is rooted in defiance? In the next section, we'll see why District 12's reluctant victors become the capital's most dangerous enemies once they're forced to live in those empty houses. Katniss Everdeen, the victor who broke the game Katniss, is the proof that you can win the games and still never be allowed to stop playing. At face value, her first victory is a love story. 2 starving teenagers from the poorest district outsmarting the arena with a handful of poisonous berries. But here's the real question. Why does that one decision scare the capital more than any sword, spear, or mutation ever could? You look back at that first arena through the victor lens. The alliance with Rue turns from a tactical choice into a political statement. A girl from District 12 publicly grieving a child from 11, covering her in flowers, turning a death scene into a funeral the capital never approved. That part matters because it forges a relationship between districts on live television. Then the berry stunt with Peter finishes the job. Instead of one lone, controllable victor, Snow gets a pair bound by a story he didn't write. 2 victors means 2 symbols, and symbols are harder to kill than tributes. So Katniss goes to Victor's village, and on paper, she's won everything. A mansion on the hill, hot water, full cupboards, her mother and Prim safe from the reaping forever. But the promise of safety comes with a catch. Nightmares follow her into every room. The silence of the empty houses is louder than the arena. She's physically closer to Haymitch and Peter, but emotionally further from Gale, who now has to walk uphill to visit the girl who escaped while he's still trapped in the scene. This is where we talk about performance as a prison. Her new job isn't hunting, it's acting. Every train ride, every interview, every shared glance with Peter has to sell the star-crossed lover's narrative, or Snow will make good on those veiled threats against her family and her district. The victory tour turns grief into a script. Repeat the capital's lines, pretend the games were fair, convince the districts that this system still offers hope if they play along. And when that starts to crack, the capital doubles down. Forced engagement. Televised wedding planning. Snow weaponizes romance because he's seen, all the way back to Lucy Gray's era, how a good story can smother rebellion. The reason he's terrified now is that Katniss keeps slipping out of his script, so she begins to weaponize her victor status right back. The spinning wedding dress that burns into a Mockingjay costume isn't just fashion, it's sabotage. A victor's body, a capital designer, and suddenly the symbol of rebellion is broadcast into every district under the guise of entertainment. There is a lot to uncover here. She uses the only tools she's allowed, clothes, interviews, that forced visibility, to send coded messages the capital can't fully control. By this point, Katniss is both more powerful and more trapped than almost any other tribute. Every move is monitored, every trauma response becomes propaganda for one side or the other. She can't choose not to be a symbol. The only choice is which war she's fighting in. So the question becomes, what happens when the capital decides even victory isn't enough protection anymore? In the next section, we're going to cover how the Quarter Quell twist turns Katniss from inconvenient victor into open enemy of the state. Peter Mellark, from bread boy to capital hostage. So when the capital decides victory isn't enough protection, who do they grab first? Not the girl on fire. The boy with the bread. Peter starts as the opposite of a career victor prototype. No weapons training, no district prestige. His power is understanding that the games are television. At face value, the star-crossed lover's confession is a romantic twist. But here's the real question. Why does a scared baker's son grasp so quickly that narrative is armor? He turns a private crush into a public storyline that forces sponsors, game makers, even Snow himself into a relationship with his survival. This is where we talk about his early victor life in Victor's village. Katniss sees the houses as a trap. Peter sees them as a stage. He leans into the romance because he thinks it's the only way to keep her safe. He paints, he trains, he does the interviews, and he keeps selling the promise that their love story is real enough that the capital shouldn't touch her. That part matters because it shows you his core strategy. If you can't beat the system with force, you try to redirect its cameras. So when the Quarter Quell twist is announced, tributes reaped from existing victors, the capital isn't just breaking a rule, they're breaking Peter's entire theory of safety. He immediately volunteers to go with Katniss, again weaponizing the love story. But notice who Snow zeroes in on. Peter is the more controllable symbol, charming, articulate, already trained to sell a narrative on cue. The capital's plan is simple. If Katniss becomes uncontrollable hope for the districts, Peter will become the counter-programming, and that's where hijacking comes in. There is a lot to uncover here. The torture isn't just physical, it's pharmaceutical propaganda. Tracker Jacker venom, used in the arena to create hallucinations, gets repurposed in a lab to rewrite his memories of Katniss's threats. Every kindness, bread in the rain, a kiss in a cave, gets flipped into an attempted murder in his mind. Why do that instead of just killing? Because a broken victor is a better warning. Peter becomes a living broadcast. This is what happens when your love story inspires rebellion. Post-rescue, he's not a healed hostage. He's an ongoing weapon. Every time he lunges at Katniss, You're watching the capital's fingerprints on his brain. The war ends, snow falls, but the hijacking doesn't magically disappear with a regime change. So what does victory even mean now? In the ashes of District 12, only Victor's village survives. And that's where Peter's final arc plays out. Slowly rebuilding with Katniss, baking planting primroses, filling that empty training house with a plant book and a kitchen that actually gets used, he proves recovery is possible. But never clean. The attacks still come. The nightmares don't stop. The promise of safety that Victor's village once sold is permanently broken. So if this is the happy ending for one of Panem's most beloved victors, what does that say about everyone who didn't get out? In the next section, we're going to cover what happens to the victors the capital can't turn into hosts or lovers, and why some of them choose to burn the system down instead of play along. Haymitch Abernathy, the original broken victor of 12. If Katniss is the moment the illusion breaks on camera, Haymitch is what happens when it breaks in private, and the capital refuses to admit it. You look at him, passed out on a victor's village couch, and think, cautionary tale. But here's the real question. Cautionary for who? To answer that, we have to go back to his games. The second quarter quell, the one that was supposed to showcase the capital's relationship with the districts by doubling the tributes. Haymitch is 17, from a coal district that doesn't produce career killers, and he's dropped into an arena wrapped in a shimmering force field. At face value, that field is a spectacle upgrade, a tech flex. In practice, it's a rule. Stay away from the edge. Don't test the system. Haymitch tests it anyway. He learns that anything thrown at the force field bounces back. That part matters because the final opponent, a brutal girl from District 1, is armed with an axe and absolute confidence that the arena obeys the capital, not physics. She hurls the weapon at his head. He steps aside. The axe hits the invisible wall, ricochets, and kills her instead. The cameras catch his expression. Not triumph, but understanding. He's just beaten the capital at their own game, on their own stage. So the capital responds the only way it knows how, not by changing the rules on air, but by rewriting his life off-screen. Within weeks of his victory tour, his mother, his younger brother, his girlfriend, gone, quietly murdered. No announcement, no investigation, just a message. If you use your brain to expose the arena, if you turn their tech into your weapon, they will turn your family into collateral. This is where we talk about long-term victor trauma as policy, not accident. Now drop that same boy into Victor's village. 12 identical houses, 11 of them empty. No cheering neighbors, no bustling parties, just silence, full power, and the echo of every person he couldn't save. He drinks because there is nothing else that reliably turns the volume down. He's hostile because kindness in Panem is a liability. But under the slur and the sarcasm, his intelligence is razor sharp. Watch how he mentors. He pretends to be checked out, then hits tributes with brutal, precise advice. Mentoring becomes armor. Keep them at a distance. And atonement, maybe this time one of them lives. And somewhere in there, he starts to rebel. Not with speeches, but with logistics. Passing messages, coordinating with Plutarch, using his victor status and those direct capital phone lines to move between train, district, and capital spaces without drawing suspicion. You think he's stumbling, he's mapping. You think he's ranting, he's recruiting. Haymitch shows you the pattern underneath every successful victor story. Survive long enough, and you either break, comply, or rebel. And most of them cycle through all three. Finnick breaks, then rebels. Johanna complies just enough, then refuses. Even Katniss follows the loop. The difference is, Haymitch has been trapped in it for decades. So when you see him on that couch, surrounded by the ruins of District 12 and the intact shells of Victor's village. You're not just looking at a drunk, you're looking at the original broken Victor of 12, the prototype for what the capital does to anyone who proves the games can be beaten. In the next section, we're going to cover what happens when victors stop numbing themselves and start turning that damage outward, weaponizing their scars against the system that made them. Careers. When your whole childhood is a reaping audition. If Haymitch is what happens when a poor district breaks the games, careers are what happens when the capital convinces you the games are your dream job. You don't wait to be reaped in districts 1, 2, and 4. You audition. These are the career districts, places where children grow up on training mats and weapon racks, where volunteering isn't a last-second act of desperation, but a long-planned debut. At face value, it looks almost patriotic. The district sends its best. The capital cheers. The arena becomes a stage for state-approved heroism instead of an execution pit. Why does that matter for victors? Because in these districts, winning is baked into the culture years before the arena. Families push kids toward the games the way other districts push them toward the mines or the lumberyards. There is a lot to uncover here. Fame, family pride, better food, fewer beatings from peacekeepers, and if you pull it off, a house in Victor's village that turns you into local nobility. You see it in Glimmer and Marble from 1, in Cato and Clove from 2, in Finnick from 4. They're not shocked to be there, they're annoyed when someone else steals their kill. The relationship between them and the arena is closer to a brutal sport. They form packs, they strategize, they talk about sponsors as if they're team managers rather than vultures betting on which child dies last. Here's the real question. Why would any parent in their right mind sign their kid up for this? The answer is the same promise Snow bakes into Victor's village. Win and your family never worries about the reaping again. Win and the peacekeepers forget minor infractions. Win and your whole district gets extra food and celebrations. In places already closer to the capital in status, that part matters because it turns the games into a ladder instead of a guillotine. This is where we talk about infrastructure. The career districts have unofficial academies, obstacle courses, instructors who just happen to be former victors. Imagine training with someone who already knows where the cameras are, how the capital edits your image, which injuries play well on television. That's not natural talent. That's systemic privilege. Contrast that with District 12. Katniss and Peter arrive underfed, undertrained, and overwhelmed, standing next to tributes who have been rehearsing their death show since they could walk. To the capital audience, careers look like natural champions, proof that some districts just produce better fighters. But the real reason is resource allocation, calories, weapons, time, and a whole culture that treats murder as extra credit. So what happens when a career actually wins and then lives long enough to think about what they've done? Finnick is the clearest answer. Groomed golden boy of 4, Trident prodigy, adored by the capital, and then sold, abused, and discarded once the cameras move on. Johanna from 7 isn't technically a career, but she's trained enough to infiltrate that world, and her rage is what happens when you realize you were groomed to kill children, for people who will never bleed for you. We're going to cover how that realization turns some careers into the capital's sharpest weapons, and others into the rebels' most dangerous allies. District 1 and 2, glamour, stone, and blood. District 1 and 2 are where that grooming turns into infrastructure. You don't just get a volunteer here, you get an assembly line. District 1's whole economy is beauty as a weapon, luxury goods, gemstones, perfumes. This is the district that literally manufactures the capital's fantasy. So of course, their tributes are packaged the same way. Glimmer in the first film, She's essentially a walking advertisement. Sequins, perfect hair, a smile that says, "This will all be fun," right up until it isn't. Kashmir, a former victor we only really meet in Catching Fire, is the more advanced model. Poised, vicious, and camera-ready. At face value, District 1 proves the promise of the games. Be beautiful, be deadly, and you too can move into a marble-fronted house in a victor's village that looks more resort than prison. But here's the real question. Why does the capital invest so much in making these killers glamorous? The reason is relationship management. District 1's victors are the bridge between capital excess and district suffering. Their homes would be dripping in imported fabrics and capital tech, their victor's village probably the closest in style to the city itself. That part matters because every child in one grows up seeing that street as proof. The games work. The system pays out if you're pretty enough and brutal enough to win. District 2 tells a different story with the same ending. This is where the peacekeepers are trained, where weapons and stone are carved, where militarism isn't a job, it's a culture. Kato in the first arena isn't just a strong tribute. He's a true believer. For him, the games are a live fire exam. Brutus in the Quarter Quell is that belief aged up, a veteran who treats returning to the arena as an honor. If District 1 sells the games as a pageant, District 2 sells them as a promotion. So why do these two districts get away with what's technically illegal everywhere else? Sanctioned combat training for children. Because the capital needs dependable victors. We're going to cover how most districts are kept weak on purpose, but 1 and 2 are rewarded for feeding the system. They get closer rail connections, more peacekeeper presence that functions more as partnership than occupation, and, crucially, victors' villages that actually fill up. Multiple generations of champions living in a cluster of mansions sends a clear message. This is the career track you want. Except there is a lot to uncover here once you zoom in. Not every career is loyal forever. Enobaria, with her filed teeth, is often read as a true capital monster. But she's really an expert adapter. She survives by leaning into the role they wrote for her, then quietly flips when survival demands it. Other unnamed victors from 1 and 2 join the rebel side during the Quarter Quell era, proof that even the favorite districts contain fault lines. And this is where we talk about the illusion of being one of the chosen. Because if the capital can break the golden children of 1 and the stone soldiers of 2, what do you think they do to the so-called successful victors from everywhere else? Finnick from 4 and Johanna from 7 are the answer to that question, and their stories show just how far the capital will go to repurpose its brightest trophies. We haven't even touched what their victors' villages really cost them. Finnick O'Dare, Capital's golden boy, Capital's darkest secret. Finnick's story is where the promise of Victor's village curdles into something much darker. You see the mansion, the fame, the jewelry nets from District 4, and you think, he won. But here's the real question. What exactly did he win? At face value, Finnick O'Dare is the capital's dream product. He takes the 65th Hunger Games at 14, the youngest victor we ever hear about, spearing mutts and outswimming tributes who trained longer than he's been alive. The arena makes him lethal. The interviews make him legendary. By the time he steps off the train into his gleaming house by the sea, he's already a capital favourite, a walking poster for why the games are supposedly worth it. But this is where we talk about the bill coming due. Snow doesn't just see a charming victor, he sees a scarce resource. Beauty, charisma, a career district body the capital drolls over. And in Panem, scarcity is never wasted. Finnick is forced into prostitution for capital elites, paraded at parties, gifted to whoever can pay. The cost of saying no. The safety of the people back home he actually loves. His relationship with his family and with Annie becomes leverage. His smile on camera is insurance that no one in District 4 disappears in the night. There is a lot to uncover here, because Finnick's greatest weapon in the arena, his ability to disarm people, get close, make them talk, gets turned against him. The Capitol thinks they're buying a body. What they're really funding is an intelligence network. While clients brag about policy, power plays, and Snow's secrets, Finnick listens. He remembers. He trades information quietly to people like Haymitch, Plutarch, the emerging rebellion. Victor's village becomes his cover story. The golden boy in his coastal mansion, always a phone call away for the right party, never suspected of espionage. So what does daily life in that house actually look like? You have this perfect seaside villa, full power, endless food, but Finnick is emotionally living underwater. The one person who pulls him back to the surface is Annie Cresta, another victor from 4. She wins her games through trauma rather than spectacle, breaking when the arena floods and her district partner dies. The Capitol writes her off as mad, but Finnick doesn't. Their relationship is the quiet rebellion Victor's village was never meant to host, a space where two broken victors insist on seeing each other as human, not capital property. That part matters because it sets up the most brutal irony of his ending. Finnick finally steps out of the role the Capitol wrote for him and into open resistance, rescuing Peter, fighting in 13, marrying Annie, expecting a child. For a moment, you think the story is bending toward actual hope. A victor who might get to enjoy his prize after the war. Then, the assault on the Capitol tunnels happens. The mutts, the darkness, the suddenness of his death on that ladder. This is a pattern interrupt for you as a viewer and for the myth of victory itself. The boy who survived the ocean arena drowns in a black underground river just before peace. His arc closes the loop. The games took his childhood, the Capitol took his body, and the war takes the future he finally earned. So when you walk past Finnick's empty house in District 4's Victor's village, what do you really see? A reward or a monument? And if this is what happens to the Capitol's golden boy, what does that say about the victors who never became favourites at all? Johanna Mason, the victor who refused to stay pretty if Finnick is the Capitol's broken prince, Johanna Mason is their failed makeover. You walk past her empty house in District 7's Victor's village, and you don't see a monument to glory. You see a dare, a reminder of what happens when a victor refuses to stay pretty. Because at face value, Johanna's games are simple. A smaller forest-heavy arena, a weak girl from a lumber district who cries, hides, and clings to stronger allies. That's the version the Capitol thought they were watching. Harmless, decorative. But here's the real question. What happens when a tribute uses the Capitol's own expectations as her weapon? Johanna spends the early days pretending she can't swing an axe, can't hurt a fly, can barely function without protection. The field thins. Careers and showboats go after the obvious threats. And then she turns. Suddenly, the girl who was supposedly useless is moving through trees with District 7 precision, using that lumber training the Capitol romanticizes in propaganda, but never expects to see turned on their favorites. A whole strategy is a mockery of the audience. You wanted a fragile little thing? You misread the entire games. That part matters because the Capitol hates being made to look stupid. With Haymitch, the punishment is the force field and a lifetime of dead loved ones. With Johanna, the revenge is more targeted, more personal. They kill her family after her victory, not during the games, when death is legal, but after, when the promise of safety is supposed to kick in. It's a message to every career-adjacent district. Win, but don't you dare outsmart us. So Johanna moves into Victor's village with no one to fill the extra bedrooms. The Capitol gives her the standard package: money, stylists, the offer to become another Finnick-style commodity, and she responds with open contempt. In a district built on rough work and splinters, she starts to hate anything polished, the carved furniture, the capital fabrics, even her own reflection when they try to soften her edges. This is where we talk about the relationship between beauty and control. If you refuse their makeover, you're refusing the role they wrote for you. We're going to cover her torture in the Quarter Quell because it rewrites her completely. Johanna is captured, imprisoned, and subjected to water-based torture, an especially cruel twist for a victor who once moved through trees and rain with ease. They don't just hurt her body, they strip away her armor, shaving her head, electrocuting her, weaponizing her fear until water itself becomes a trigger. The girl who once weaponized performance is now terrified of the very element used to keep her alive. Post-war, Joanna survives, but the word survivor feels dishonest. She's still angry, still razor-sharp, still the one who will say what everyone else is afraid to name. But the trauma is permanent. No family, no comforting district home, no return to the person she was before the arena or before the prison. The new Panem offers her peace, yet she's proof that victors are never allowed to be whole people, only tools when useful or warnings when defiant. And if this is the fate of a victor from a mid-tier district, what does that tell you about the ones who never had the capital's attention at all? In the next section, we'll look at a victor who disappears so completely, you almost forget they ever existed. The quiet geniuses, BT, Wirus, and the weaponization of brains that disappearing victor the capital wants you to forget. Sometimes they don't vanish into poverty or anonymity. They vanish into a lab. This is where we talk about BT and Wirus. On paper, they're terrible candidates to win the games. Thin, nervous, tech-savvy tributes from a manufacturing district that's supposed to build gadgets, not gladiators. At face value, District 3 is background scenery compared to the career districts. But here's the real question. What happens when the arena is less about swords and more about systems? The answer is BT and Wirus slip through the cracks of the capital's own design. We're going to cover why their victories are such an embarrassment to the system. In Catching Fire, you see it immediately. They're not physically imposing. They're not charismatic showpieces. Wirus mutters tick-tock and stares at the sky. BT is quiet, analytical, always watching. Their weapon isn't muscle, it's pattern recognition. They map the arena, decode the force field, understand the timing. They survive by treating the games as a puzzle, not a battlefield. And the capital notices, because District 3's gift to Panem is technology. BT and Wirus don't just win and go home to a nice house in Victor's village. They get drafted into a different kind of arena, designing weapons, traps, defense grids, the same mind that can turn a coil of wire into a lightning strike can also upgrade the capital's security network. That part matters because it shows you another relationship between Victor and capital. Not just body as spectacle, but brain as state property. Why does Snow keep them around? Why give a traumatized engineer access to the Empire's nervous system? The reason is control and fear, in equal measure. If BT is building your fences, he can't be breaking them in theory. But you can feel the moral conflict in him. The intense focus, the almost obsessive need to get the tech right, sits right next to the guilt of knowing his designs help keep other districts in chains. Wirus shows the other side of that bargain, her cryptic speech, her fragility, the way other victors instinctively protect her, all hint that the capital has been using her mind for years and breaking it at the same time. You're watching long-term trauma expressed as genius that can't quite turn off. She sees patterns no one else sees, but she can't always translate them into safety fast enough. And then, the twist. The rebellion takes the very tools the capital extracted from them and turns them back. BT works on the Quarter-Quell Arena's force field. He understands its weaknesses because he understands its purpose. Later, he becomes the architect of the rebel communications network, the one who hijacks the airwaves and helps bring down the capital's infrastructure. The games taught him to weaponize electricity. The capital paid him to perfect it. The rebellion pays that investment back with interest. So why does that redefine what a victor is? Because BT and Wiress prove you don't have to be a career killer to terrify the capital. Sometimes the most dangerous victor is the one quietly rewriting the code behind the spectacle. And if brains can be weaponized this way, what happens when a victor's entire personality becomes a weapon too? That's where we're headed next. Mid-tier districts. The victors we never meet. If BT and Wiress weaponize intellect, the mid-tier districts weaponize something much quieter. Obscurity. We never meet a victor from District 5, 8, 9 or 10 on the page. District 6 only slips through as those morphling addicts in Catching Fire. But here's the real question. The Quarter-Quell roster proves there had to be at least one surviving victor from every district. So where are they? Why don't we know their names? And what does that absence tell you about the system? At face value, you could say, well, Katniss just doesn't interact with them. And that's true on a plot level. Our point of view is limited, but there is a lot to uncover here once you plug those blank spaces back into the capital's logic. If the games run for 75 years, even a non-career district is going to produce a handful of victors. Panem doesn't throw away useful symbols. If we don't see them on TV, it probably means they weren't useful. This is where we talk about District 6. The only hint we get is brutal. 2 former victors turned morphling addicts, barely functional in the arena. Why would that be the image the capital allows you to see? The reason is simple and cruel. They're cautionary tales. The relationship between victory and reward collapses when you're watching a once celebrated tribute shaking in a corner, high out of their mind, unable to hold a spear. Now imagine where they go home to. We're going to cover the victors' villages that never make it into the cameras. In District 8, the air smells like textile dye and machine oil. You picture a tiny cul-de-sac of 12 houses, slapped down beside endless factories, windows always lit, sirens always going. Maybe 2 houses are occupied. The rest are dark shells. Children walk past on their way to the looms and see luxury they'll never touch, attached to a victor they never see. District 10's village would be even weirder. Wide open fields, livestock everywhere, then a sad little knot of mansions on a low hill. A victor there probably grew up herding cattle, not training with swords. So what does the capital do with them after the games? Parade them at livestock fairs? Put their face on grain rations? Their talent might be judging breeding stock on camera, selling the promise that hard work and obedience can turn a ranch kid into royalty. In District 5, the power district, practically writes itself. Imagine a victor whose mansion always has electricity, while the rest of the district browns out. That part matters because it turns them into a walking reminder of inequality. You don't just see the games on TV, you see them every time the lights go off in your own house and stay on in theirs. So, what roles do these forgotten victors actually play? Not Finnick-level celebrities, not even Haymitch-style local legends, more like mid-tier enforcers and props. They show up for peacekeeper rallies, cut ribbons at new factories, star in one awkward capital interview a year. And when they can't play along anymore, the capital doesn't need to publicly execute them. It can just let them self-destruct. Here's the real question the books never answer out loud. How many unnamed victors died in those half-empty villages, addicted or alone, their deaths barely a footnote in some capital highlight reel? If Katniss is the exception who breaks the story open, how many others were quietly broken and then erased? Because once you realize most victors vanish into that silence, it makes the few we do meet feel a lot less random and a lot more dangerous for Snow. Why does the Capitol even allow volunteers? Once you notice how many victors just disappear, another problem pops up. If the games are supposed to be a punishment, a permanent scar on every district, then why does the Capitol even allow volunteers in the first place? Think about the contradiction. On paper, the games are the ultimate reminder that the districts lost the war. You step onto that square every reaping knowing 2 names are about to be pulled at random. Terror works best when you have no control, right? To step forward, to say I volunteer, especially in the richer districts, where kids are literally training for this. At face value, it makes no sense. If Snow really wanted maximum fear, you'd expect the harshest possible model. No volunteers. Ever. Just the bold. Just the odds. Every child equally eligible, no escape clause, no sibling swooping in, no career stepping up because they've been preparing since age 5. Pure lottery, pure dread. Imagine that version of Panem for a second. No victor's village waiting on the edge of town. No promise that your district might get extra food if someone pulls off a win. No glossy tour, no parade, no Finico Dare being treated as a celebrity before being treated as a possession. Just a yearly reminder that the Capitol can take your children and give you nothing back. So here's the real question. Why don't Snow and the game makers choose that cleaner, crueler system? What do they gain by letting some people opt in and then win big? There is a lot to uncover here, because once you add volunteers, the games stop being only a punishment and start pretending to be a competition. Career districts build whole training cultures around that one loophole. Kids in 1, 2, and 4 are told there's a path to glory, that becoming a victor means wealth, status, and a house on the hill. That part matters because it turns terror into aspiration. Volunteers make the games look like a choice. Not for everyone, but for someone. When Marvel or Clove steps forward, the Capitol can point at them and say, see? They wanted this. They trained for this. They earned this. It's the same trick they pull with Tesserae, technically voluntary, practically coerced, but it lets the Capitol shrug and pretend the system is fair. And once you have volunteers, you can justify Victor's village. You can say, these are the people who chose to fight and survived. Of course they deserve more. The mansions, the tours, the phone lines to the Capitol, even the forced talents and prostitution. All of that is wrapped in the language of reward. This is where we talk about Snow's favorite subject, the relationship between hope and fear. To really understand the volunteers, the victors, and those empty houses waiting in every district, we have to ask what kind of hope the Capitol is selling and how it keeps the games running long after the arena shuts down. Hope, fear, and the math of 1 victor a year Snow actually tells you the strategy out loud. In that garden scene with Seneca Crane, surrounded by roses and blood-red punch, he spells it out. Fear isn't enough. Terror alone makes people desperate. They run. They riot. What the Capitol needs is a little hope. Not too much. Just enough to keep people reaching for something they'll never really touch. Here's the real question. How do you turn that abstract idea into a system that runs for 75 years? This is where we talk about the math of the games. Every year, 24 tributes go in. 1 victor comes out. 23 deaths on screen, in high definition, rewatched in every district. That's your horror quota. That's the reminder that the Capitol can take your child and make them kill or die. But then there's that one survivor, crowned in confetti and gold. At face value, they're proof the impossible can happen. Someone from your district can beat the arena. Someone from your street can come home rich. That part matters because it turns the games from a pure punishment into a twisted lottery. You're not just afraid of being chosen, you're also secretly calculating, what if it's my kid who wins? What if volunteering isn't suicide, but a strategy? That's the psychological relationship Snow is selling to the districts. Terror braided with the faint promise of escape. Victor's village is the physical embodiment of that 1% miracle. You don't just hear about a Victor on TV, you can point to their mansion on the hill. You walk past the empty houses, the working power, the untouched furniture. It's permanent, visible proof that winning exists as a category. Back then, they sent Victors home with almost nothing. Now, the capital builds shrines you can't enter. For a 12-year-old watching the reaping, that neighborhood is the ad campaign. You see Hamish staggering on the porch. You see Katniss and Peter's warm windows in a frozen District 12 winter. You see that the arena might be hell, but there's a heaven district adjacent if you survive. But Snow doesn't just build hope, he calibrates it. That's where the quarter quells come in. Every 25 years, the rules change. The second quell forces districts to vote on their own tributes, turning neighbors into executioners and reminding everyone that their tiny bit of agency can be weaponized. The third quell rips the mask off completely. Victors are reaped again. The very people who proved the dream was real are thrown back into the nightmare. Each quell says, you can hope, but only on capital terms. So every Victor's life becomes a balancing act engineered from above. They must be hopeful enough to inspire volunteers, to keep districts training careers and fantasizing about parades. But they're also kept broken enough, through trauma, addiction, prostitution, surveillance, that they never quite become a unified threat. That's the reason Snow tolerates someone as volatile as Johanna or as beloved as Finnick. Their existence sells the product, even as their suffering keeps them in line. The problem for the capital is simple. What happens when the one person meant to stabilize that equation, Katniss, the girl on fire in her perfect Victor's village house, starts tipping the math the other way? The second quarter quell, when Victors became villains at home, so when Katniss starts tipping the math the other way, the capital reaches for its oldest, nastiest calculator, the quarter quell. Most people remember the 75th, but the real blueprint for turning Victors into enemies at home is the second quarter quell. That's the one where the rule wasn't reaped from the Victors. It was worse. Each district had to vote on which of their own citizens to send to the games. At face value, that sounds almost democratic. The capital pretends it's handing power back to the districts. You choose. But here's the real question. What happens to your sense of community when you've literally written someone's death sentence on a slip of paper? That part matters because Snow isn't just killing tributes, he's killing trust. Think about the long-term effect. In a normal reaping, you resent the capital, maybe fate, maybe the tesserae system. With the second quell, you go home knowing your neighbor, your teacher, maybe your own family helped send you there. And if you somehow win, you don't come back as a pure symbol of hope. You come back as a walking reminder of a collective betrayal. This is where we talk about the relationship between those victors and their districts. On stage, they're celebrated, the parades still happen, the feasts, the school assemblies where kids are told to cheer. But under that, sideways glances, quiet rooms when they walk in, parents thinking, did I mark their name? Did my vote kill someone else instead? The victor becomes both the hero who survived and the proof that everyone around them was willing to sacrifice them. So you build them a mansion in Victor's village, supposedly a reward. In reality, a buffer zone. They live slightly apart, in comfort, but also in quarantine from the community they can't fully trust. And they can't fully trust them. There is a lot to uncover here. Every lit window in those empty streets is a reminder of who didn't make it back. And every occupied house is a reminder of who was meant to die. And then we jump forward to Hamish. Different quell, the 50th, different twist. But the pattern is the same. The capital takes what should be his support system and turns it into a weapon. They kill his mother, his brother, his girlfriend as punishment for outsmarting their arena. He wins the games, but loses the only people who might have helped him live with it. So by the time we reach the 75th games, you're not just looking at traumatized former tributes, you're looking at people who've been systematically cut off from home. Second quell victors resented by their districts. Hamish, hated by the capital and barely tolerated in 12. Johanna, whose loved ones are murdered. Finnick, sold as a secret to the capital elite. How do you mentor children from a place that either fears you, envies you, or blames you? Here's the real question going into that third quell. When Snow reaps from the existing pool of victors, is he just punishing troublemakers, or is he cashing in on decades of broken relationships he's already engineered? Because once you see that, every older victor at the 75th isn't just fighting the arena, they're fighting the memory of a district that never really brought them home. And that's going to matter when we look at who chooses to protect Katniss and who chooses to let the capital burn. The third quarter quell, turning victors back into tributes, so when Snow pulls out that little gold envelope for the third quarter quell, he isn't just announcing a twist, he's announcing the death of a promise. The official rule sounds simple. For the 75th games, the tributes will be reaped from the existing pool of victors. In each district, at face value, it's a gimmick. A greatest hits season. But here's the real question. What happens to a system that's been telling you for 74 years that winning means you never go back, and then suddenly says, actually, you do? That part matters, because Victor's Village is built on that one guarantee. You endure the games once, you get your mansion, your steady food, your supposed safety from the reaping. Snow takes that contract and tears it up on live television. The relationship between Victor and Capital flips overnight. You're no longer the poster child for hope, you're a reminder that the capital can repossess your life whenever it wants. Politically, the motive is razor sharp. Snow needs Katniss dead. She's turned a rigged love story into an uncontrollable symbol, and symbols are harder to bomb than districts. So why the quell? Why not just have her meet with an accident? Because he doesn't just want her gone. He wants every district to watch the capital crush its own heroes. The message is, if we can throw Finnick, Johanna, Beatty, and even Mags back into the arena, what chance do you have? This is where we talk about the psychological impact on the victors themselves. You've got people who've spent decades trying to survive their memories, suddenly told they're going back into the same nightmare. Mags, who's so old she can barely walk, voluntarily steps forward to take Annie's place. Beatty and Wirris, the brains of their district, are forced to turn that intellect back toward killing fields instead of technology. Johanna's rage in the elevator, that's not attitude. That's someone realizing every humiliation she endured for the capital still wasn't enough to buy real safety. And the districts are watching all of this. You look up at the screen in 12 and see Hamish's name drawn, then swapped for Katniss. In 4, they drag Finnick out in his finery, and people who know what the capital did to him understand exactly how rigged this reaping really is. Victor's Village stops being a reward and starts reading as a holding pen, a delay before the next execution. But here's the twist Snow doesn't see coming. By pulling victors from every district, he accidentally creates the only group in Panem who understand the games, the capital, and each other better than he does. We're going to cover the mechanics of the arena in a second, but notice what happens before the bloodbath even starts. Alliances form across districts, signals are exchanged, and suddenly the question isn't who will win, it's can we break the board altogether. There is a lot to uncover here because the third quarter quell doesn't just fail to crush hope, it concentrates it. The arena becomes a fuse. And when that fuse hits the force field, it doesn't just blow up the games, it blows up the future Snow thought he'd secured. So how do victors turn a death sentence into open rebellion inside the most controlled space in Panem? That's where we go next, into the clock arena itself. Victors as propaganda, tours, parties, and prostitution. The arena is the fuse, but the explosion doesn't really happen until the victors step off the train. Because here's the real question. If the third quarter quell turns the arena into a spark for rebellion, what turns the victors themselves into weapons aimed back at the capital? And the answer is ugly, and it starts with the thing that's supposed to be a celebration, the victory tour. At face value, the tour is a thank you parade. You're a victor. You ride through every district in a shiny train. You wave, you smile, you give speeches about hope. That's the promise. Food in the streets, music, banners with your face 10 stories high. But there is a lot to uncover here, because every stop is also a funeral you didn't ask to attend. Katniss and Peter have to stand in front of Rue's family and praise the same capital that murdered her. That part matters because it teaches every victor the script. Your survival is only acceptable if you help sell the deaths behind it. Then you get back to the capital and the real games begin. This is where we talk about the party circuit. Endless parties, themed after your games, your district, your brand. You're expected to be charming on cue, tell funny anecdotes about trauma, toast President Snow with something neon in your glass. Haymitch drinks himself numb for a reason. Johanna strips in an elevator not just to shock Katniss, but because her body has been treated as a spectacle for years. The capital calls it hospitality. What it really is conditioning. If you want sponsors for your tributes, if you want your family safe, you keep performing. And under all of that, there's the thing Finnick Odair finally names. Prostitution, but weaponized as policy. Finnick is the clearest example. A golden boy from District 4, sold to capital elites from the time he's a teenager. He trades secrets because that's the only currency he has, but the reason he complies is simple. Say no and Snow hurts the people back home. You have to assume Finnick isn't unique. Johanna hints she was punished for refusing. Annie's fragility makes horrific sense if you imagine what access to a famous unstable victor would mean to certain capital patrons. So the relationship between victor and capital becomes this twisted contract. Your body, your story, your grief. None of it belongs to you. The capital repackages everything for consumption, talk shows, fashion spreads, replayed death scenes. You're not just a survivor, you're intellectual property. Anytime you try to pull away, they threaten your district, your loved ones, even your fellow victors. Why does this push so many of them toward rebellion? Because the control never ends. The games follow you into every bed, every stage, every camera angle. By the time Snow reaps from the pool of victors for the quarter quell, many of them are already done being props. So when that arena force field blows, you're not just seeing strategy, you're seeing years of tours, parties and exploitation finally snap. And the next step those victors take will change Panem forever. Addiction, PTSD, and the slow collapse of Victor's village. And here's where the capital's happily ever after starts to rot from the inside. Because the arena ends, but your nervous system doesn't get that memo. Victors go home with a pattern. Nightmares so vivid you wake up mid-scream. Hypervigilance that keeps you cataloguing exits at every party. Survivor's guilt that whispers you should have died instead. So what do you do when you can't turn that off? You self-medicate. That's the quiet sequel to almost every games. At face value, the capital hands you luxury. In practice, it hands you a fully stocked bar and an endless pharmacy. Haymitch is the most obvious example. You meet him as a drunk, but now you can see why. He's the boy who outsmarted a force field, watched everyone else die, and then had to send children to their deaths for the rest of his life. The bottle isn't a quirk, it's anesthesia. District 6 takes that even further. Their morphling victors are walking warnings. They win, they move into Victor's village, and then they disappear into capital-grade opiates until they're barely functional. When they show up in the quarter quell, they're shaky, distracted, but still capable of sacrifice. That part matters because it tells you the addiction isn't weakness, it's a symptom of a system that never lets them heal. Then you have Annie Crester. She survives a flood arena, watches her district partner beheaded, and the capital still expects her to smile on camera. Of course, she fractures. We're going to cover her love story with Finnick later, but here you just need to see the pattern. Instability isn't random. It's a predictable outcome of repeated terror. Johanna Mason is the flip side. No morphling, no visible breakdown at first. Instead, she weaponizes rage and numbness. She strips in an elevator, mocks the capital, and treats intimacy as a joke. It reads rebellious and funny, but look closer and you see someone who has burned through fear and landed in emotional freefall. So what does all of that do to Victor's village itself? On paper, it's a reward suburb. In reality, it's a ghost town with good plumbing. You have these big, polished houses filled with people who can't sleep through the night. Some victors avoid each other because seeing another survivor triggers memories of the arena. Others cling to each other in trauma bonds, the way Finnick and Annie do, because no one else in the district can understand what they've seen. Here's the real question. Why doesn't anyone move in to fill the silence? Because isolation is part of the design. Victor's village is always set apart, physically and socially. You're pulled out of your old neighborhood, away from the only people who knew you before the games. To the rest of the district, you're not just a hero. You're dangerous. Half capital, a reminder that the peacekeepers can reach into any home and turn a child into a killer. There is a lot to uncover here about that relationship. The capital promises hope, but it also builds a fence of stigma around you. No real community, no real accountability, just surveillance and substance access. By the time of the rebellion, many victors' villages aren't rewards at all. They're open-air asylums the capital prefers to ignore. Clusters of traumatized, chemically managed victors who are supposed to be too broken to fight back. Supposed to be. This is where we talk about what happens when some of them decide to weaponize that damage instead. Secret alliances, how victors became the rebellion's nerve network supposed to be. But if you give traumatized champions money, trains, and direct phone lines to the capital, how long before they start using those tools for something other than Snow's script? Here's the real question. How do a handful of isolated victors turn into the rebellion's nervous system without anyone in the capital noticing until it's too late? At face value, Victor's village is a cage on the edge of town. But it also comes with a passport. Every year, victors are shipped out on victory tours, mentoring trips, capital parties, and special appearances. That part matters because most regular citizens never leave their district, ever. So when Finnick from 4 can quietly talk to Beatty from 3, or when Johanna runs into Haymitch between interviews, you suddenly have something the capital never wanted: cross-district relationships. We're going to cover how those relationships turn into a network. You see it in the way Haymitch knows far more than a drunk from 12 should. He's been traveling for decades, watching games, talking to other victors in train cars and prep rooms, piecing together patterns. He knows chaff from 11, Cedar, the morphling pair from 6. By the time Katniss wins, Haymitch already has a mental map of who might say yes if the right question is asked. This is where we talk about Plutarch Heavensbee and the quiet coup inside the Capitol itself. Plutarch isn't just a sympathetic game maker, he's recruiting. He uses those same trains and parties to pull victors aside, test their anger, measure their hope. Beatty and Wiress from 3, with their obsession over systems and glitches. Finnick, who has blackmail on half the Capitol because of the abuse he's endured. Johanna, stripped of everyone she loves as punishment. They're not random allies. They're hand-picked assets in a long-term plan. The 75th Games is where the network finally shows its wiring. Almost every tribute except the careers is in on something, even if they don't know the full blueprint. Beatty's mysterious wire, Finnick's instant protection of Katniss, Joanna attacking Katniss just to rip out her tracker. It feels chaotic. It's actually coordinated. Haymitch and Plutarch have spent months using Victor channels to pass messages, test loyalties, and design an arena break that only works if multiple districts move. As one, why do they risk everything for each other? Because no one else understands them. Their districts see the mansion and the money. Other victors see the nightmares, the prostitution, the threat hanging over every person they love. Shared trauma becomes a stronger bond than any promise the Capitol can offer. In the end, they're more loyal to each other than to the system that made them. And without that loyalty, the rebellion doesn't work. The districts bring numbers, but the victors bring something rarer: visibility, mobility, and proof that the Capitol can bleed. The Capitol built them up as symbols of hope. The twist is that those symbols start moving on their own. So what happens when the Capitol realizes its trophies are conspiring in plain sight? Book versus movie. Which victors did the cameras erase? So what happens when the Capitol realizes its trophies are conspiring in plain sight? One of the first things it does, without saying a word, is disappear them. Not in universe, but in the way the story is shown to you. Because here's the real question: which victors does the camera decide are worth remembering, and which ones quietly fall back into the shadows? On the page, there is a lot to uncover here. Beatty isn't just a smart tech guy, he's the nervous, stammering mind who won his games by rewiring the arena itself, a living reminder that the Capitol's systems can be hacked. Wiress isn't just a crazy lady who says tick-tock. In the book, you watch Katniss slowly realize this damaged victor is actually the one who solves the clock arena before anyone else. That part matters because it turns Wiress from a quirk into a warning. The Capitol breaks the people who see too much. Same with the Morphlings from District 6. At face value in the movie, their background color, sacrificial distractions. In the book, you get those tiny, piercing details. The male Morphlings shaking hands, the female's obsession with color and light, the quiet moment where she dies staring at Peter's painting of the Rue mural. They're not random addicts, they're what happens when the promise of victory collides with trauma the Capitol has no intention of treating. And then there are the older victors in the 75th. Cedar, Cecilia, Chaff, Woof. On the page, Katniss recognizes their names, their reputations, the way they reach for each other in that training center, forming this worn-out, inter-district family. We're going to cover every victor, but this is where we talk about the ones who only exist in full when you're reading, not watching. The films compress all of that. Less time in training, fewer conversations, almost no sense that these people have been mentoring, touring, and quietly rebelling for decades. Victor's village itself gets streamlined. In the books, it's spaced out houses, Haymitch's decayed mess, Katniss and Peter's shared plant book, the phone line from Snow, Katniss hiding in an empty house when the fence is electrified. On screen, it becomes a quick establishing shot, a mood. then we're back to Katniss's immediate crisis. So why does that shift matter? Because it narrows the rebellion into a tight circle around one girl and her closest allies, when the text keeps insisting there's this whole older generation of broken victors whose resentment has been simmering for years. The relationship between Capital and Victor becomes personal in the films. In the books, it's systemic, almost industrial. Visually, the movies gain something. The cold symmetry of Victor's village on its hill, the sterile luxury of Capital's suites, the spectacle of Finnick and Johanna on stage. But they lose the slow burn. You don't really see older Victors mentoring younger ones on the green, or Haymitch shuffling between houses, or the quiet evenings where someone finally asks Beatty, "How did you really win?" So imagine the missing scenes, the late-night kitchen table talks, the shared nightmares, the whispered questions about the quarter quell long before Snow announces it. Because once you start picturing those, you start asking a much bigger question. What were all those erased victors already planning before Katniss ever volunteered? And how close did they come to burning the capital down first? Designing each district's Victor's Village, Lore Accurate Edition. So if victors were already whispering rebellion in the shadows, where did they go when the whispers stopped? You don't just send your most dangerous survivors back to a random apartment block, you build them a stage. This is where we talk about Victor's Village as architecture and propaganda at the same time. At face value, it's the big prize. A house, hot water, full cupboards. But here's the real question. What does each district's version of that prize quietly say about the relationship between the capital and its victors? Start with the one we know best. District 12's village sits on a little rise physically above the scene and the merchant streets. You walk up out of coal dust and hunger, and suddenly there are 12 neat houses. Lawns, power always on, but it's empty, haunted. Before Katniss and Peter move in, it's basically Haymitch and a lot of silence. That part matters because the capital's promise of win and you'll never be hungry again becomes this eerie cul-de-sac of trauma, surrounded by people still starving. You're safe from the reaping, but every window looks out on the life you escaped and can never rejoin. Now jump to District 1. If any place is going to lean into the fantasy, it's the luxury district that manufactures prizes for the games. Their Victor's Village almost has to look jewel-cut. Polished stone, shimmering glass, fountains that echo Capitol plazas. You can imagine Victors here treated as hometown celebrities, front row at pageants, setting trends for hair and armor. But look closer. Those opulent houses would sit right on the main trade routes to the capital, so every shipment passing through sees them. The message isn't subtle. Be beautiful, be lethal, and this could be you. District 2's village would feel different again. Less glitter, more fortress. Think heavy stone, narrow streets, maybe even built into a hillside near the training center. Victors here aren't just trophies. They're officers, peacekeeper trainers, informal nobility. You can picture a kid walking past those houses on the way to the academy, seeing their future commander on the balcony. We're going to cover later how 2's loyalty fractures, but the seeds are in that layout. The capital rewards you, then folds you into its enforcement machine. Then you hit the agricultural districts, and the illusion gets thinner. In 11, 9, 10, Victor's Village might just be a ring of nicer farmhouses, a small compound with better roofs, proper wells, maybe a clinic. Still better than the fields. Nowhere near capital luxury. You'd see fruit trees instead of fountains, reinforced barns instead of marble foyers. The reward is scaled down to what that district already understands, so it feels reachable, almost reasonable. But here's the twist. Change the paint, change the floor plan, the function stays the same. Every village is a cage with better furniture. They're all set apart, all heavily monitored, all designed so victors remain visible billboards and convenient hostages. The capital doesn't just want you to win, it wants you to live where everyone can watch you prove that winning the games was worth it. Or at least, that's the story, right up until Snow decides even the cages are expendable. Life between broadcasts, a day in the life of a victor. So what does a day in that cage actually feel like when the cameras aren't rolling and the anthem isn't playing? Because here's the real question. If Victor's Village is supposed to be a reward, why does almost every morning there start with a nightmare? You wake up late, if you slept at all. Katniss thrashes out of dreams, where Rue is falling again, where the Mutts still have her friend's eyes. Finnick jolts awake to the sound of phantom capital applause that turns in his head into screaming. Haymitch doesn't really wake up so much as he comes to, surrounded by empty bottles, already behind on the day's attempt to stay numb. Other victors do the opposite, clinging to rigid routines because if they don't move, the memories move in. So you run, you train, you shoot arrows or throw knives at practice dummies that will never bleed, or you pour something strong into your coffee and pretend it's just to take the edge off. At face value, this is luxury. Hot water on demand. Full power, a pantry that refills itself. But that part matters because it hides the real routine. Monitoring. There is a lot to uncover here. The phone in the kitchen isn't just a phone, it's a leash. Stylists call to check in, to suggest a new hairstyle, a new talent performance, a new capital segment. Snow's office sends neat little reminders about upcoming games, mentoring, about tours, about how your cooperation keeps your district safe. There's no explicit threat most days, just the repeated relationship you owe us. Then there are the visits. A nervous district official arrives with a clipboard and a forced smile, asking if everything is satisfactory, while carefully not mentioning the last time you snapped at a peacekeeper. School groups walk past the village on educational routes. Kids stare from the road, whispering, pointing. You're a promise and a warning at the same time. Sometimes a teenager lingers a bit too long at the gate, clearly a potential tribute, asking casual questions about training or volunteering. This is where we talk about mentoring as year-round pressure, not a single pre-games montage. So how do you survive the hours in between? You cling to hobbies that are really coping mechanisms. Finnick ties knots until his fingers ache, rehearsing control over something, anything. Beatty tinkers with circuits in District 3, taking apart old electronics the way his mind keeps taking apart the arena. Johanna walks through her perfect District 7 house and quietly destroys anything ornamental, any capital-issued vase or frilly curtain, because breaking their gifts is the only rebellion she can afford that day. Katniss hunts beyond the fence, when she can, because the woods are the only place that ever felt honest. And then there's the silence. Long echoing stretches where no one calls, no one visits, and you are alone with the games on loop in your head. There is no therapist, no real support, only the capital's expectation that when that phone finally rings, you will answer sounding stable, grateful, camera ready. So why does Snow invest so much in keeping victors polished on the surface while they're crumbling underneath? We're going to cover how that private collapse becomes a public weapon in the next part, when the capital starts turning individual trauma into open rebellion fuel. The war's end. What happens to victors after the capital falls? The capital spends years polishing its victors into symbols. Then the capital falls. So what happens to the symbols when the stage burns down? Here's the real question. If your entire identity has been built as the capital's promise of hope, what are you once that promise is exposed as a lie? The war ends, Snow is captured, Coin is in power, and suddenly the surviving victors are no longer props. They're witnesses. They're weapons in a different kind of arena. We know some of the names that make it out the other side. Katniss, Peter, Haymitch, Johanna, Beatty, Annie, Enobaria, probably a handful of other victors from the outer districts, implied but never paraded again. At face value, they're the success stories of the rebellion, the ones who lived. But that part matters because survival in Panem always comes with a contract you didn't get to read. Immediately after the war, their roles snap into place. You see it at Snow's execution, or what's supposed to be his execution. Katniss, the Mockingjay, is put front and center as the one who will deliver the final shot. The other victors are there too, as a kind of jury of the broken. Then there's the infamous symbolic final games proposal, where Coin suggests a new Hunger Games using capital children. This is where we talk about how deep the damage goes. Johanna, Enobaria, even Haymitch vote yes. Only Peter, Beatty and Annie refuse. You're watching a room of people so shaped by the games that they genuinely debate recreating them. From there, their paths split. Beatty, with his genius and his war work, folds into the new government and advisory circles. He's the kind of victor a rebuilt Panem can use. Technical, strategic, apparently stable. Plutarch mentions victors helping design a new system. You can imagine Beatty in every meeting, quietly rewiring the nation the way he once rewired force fields. Others retreat. Johanna disappears from public life, too traumatized and stripped of her district's trees and water to keep performing. Enobaria, spared execution, is a loose thread. She's dangerous, tied to District 2, and the text leaves her future deliberately fuzzy. Annie returns to District 4 with Finnick's son, haunted but determined to build something gentler than anything she ever saw in the arena. And then there's Katniss and Peter, back in the ruins of District 12. Peter still has hijacking episodes, flashes where his relationship to Katniss rewrites itself into hatred and fear. Katniss cycles through depression, numbness, and those real or not real check-ins that function as both therapy and survival tactic. There is a lot to uncover here about how the games never really end. The arena just moves into your head. All of this raises a strange, quiet question. What happens to Victor's village now? Katniss and Peter live there, in those empty houses built as trophies. Do other districts keep their villages, repurpose them as museums, or abandon them as relics of a system everyone wants to pretend they didn't help maintain? If the new Panem is serious about ending the games, can it keep the mansions that were literally designed to sell them? So why does the story leave so many of those details implied instead of spelled out? We're going to cover how those empty houses, those missing victors, and those unresolved votes hint at the next potential cycle of power in Panem, and who might be ready to start the games all over again. Katniss and Peter's quiet epilogue. Can a victor ever be okay? So if those empty mansions can be reused by the next regime, what does it mean that Katniss and Peter go back to theirs? You return to District 12's Victor's Village, and it's almost post-apocalyptic. 12 houses in the books, built to advertise the games, and now 2 living victors and Haymitch. No cheering crowds, no power-hungry mayor, just bomb craters in town, and this weird pocket of untouched capital suburbia on the hill. At face value, it's safety, but you can feel why Katniss calls it haunted. This is where we talk about ghosts, not just the dead from the arena, but the missing victors who were supposed to fill those other houses. Every empty kitchen is a reminder that someone else won and then vanished into Snow's system. There is a lot to uncover here in how the village flips from propaganda set to mausoleum. The capital built it to promise hope. Now it's a museum of broken promises. So how do you even start a life there? Katniss doesn't throw a housewarming party. She starts a book of the dead. Page after page, she writes down the names and memories of Rue, Prim, Finnick, all the people the games and the war chewed up. Peter sketches their faces. That's their coping mechanism. Turn the horror into record, because forgetting would feel worse. It's a private counter-propaganda project in the very space the Capitol designed for shiny victor narratives. Outside, she hunts again. But here's the real question. Is she hunting to feed herself, or to feel like the girl from the scene before she was turned into a symbol? She brings Peter sometimes, even though he was never a hunter. That part matters because it shows their relationship to the arena has shifted. The woods used to be illegal. Now they're one of the only places that don't feel like a stage. And then there are the primroses. Planting flowers for Prim in front of a victor's mansion is almost darkly ironic. The village exists because children were sacrificed. Katniss fills it with something gentle and useless to the war effort. It's grief guarding as rebellion. Do they get a happy ending? Yes and no. They still wake up screaming. Katniss still has days where she's the girl who was on fire, burned out. Peter still wrestles with hijacked memories and flashbacks, but they also bake and hunt and sit with Haymitch watching the geese. The games don't disappear. They just stop being the only thing. Their decision to have children is the most controversial detail. Is it a betrayal of the promise Katniss made to herself, or proof the new Panem is different? The reason it hits so hard is because it's not framed as healing by Erasure. She tells us it took 15 years to agree. That's not a neat epilogue, Bo. That's a long negotiation with fear. So why say yes at all? It's a fragile vote of confidence that this new system won't throw their kids into an arena. Not blind trust, more like I'm 60% sure they'll be safe. And that's more than anyone ever gave me. And here's the uncomfortable question. Can any victor ever really leave the arena, or can they only build something tender on top of the wreckage? Katniss and Peter's quiet life doesn't cancel out the trauma. It coexists with it, which raises one more issue we're going to cover next. If this is the best case scenario for victors, what does that say about everyone else who survived Panem's games without a mansion at all? Annie, Johanna, Beetee, and the others. Fragmented futures. If Katniss and Peter are the closest thing we get to a functional ending, what does that say about everyone who doesn't have a partner or a shared plant book, or even a stable sense of self to fall back on? This is where we talk about the fragmented futures. Start with Annie. On paper, she's the happy epilogue. A single mother in a peaceful District 4, raising Finnick's son, without the games, without snow, without the Capitol's cameras. At face value, that sounds almost merciful. But here's the real question. What does peace mean to someone who broke during her first arena and then watched the ocean fill with battleships during the war? You can imagine the new government making sure she has a house, a stipend, maybe even therapy in whatever form Panem can invent. That part matters because it shows the system trying to keep its promise of care. But no committee can sit with her during a storm when the wind sounds too much like cannon fire. Then there's Johanna. She survives torture, electrocution, water deprivation, and the loss of everyone she ever let herself care about. So where do you put someone whose entire relationship to authority is, I will burn this down if you push me? She's too dangerous to ignore, too symbolic to discard. Maybe she ends up in training, teaching new peacekeepers what real fear looks like. Maybe she consults on security, or just stalks the edges of Victor's Village 2.0, a bitter reminder that the games were real. There is a lot to uncover here, because any attempt to make her normal would be its own kind of violence. The new Panem needs her as a warning, but also as proof that they're not snow. They don't disappear inconvenience victors. BT is the flip side of that problem. He's a weaponized mind who now has to live with the fact that his genius powered both rebellion and the Capitol's tech. So what do you ask him to build? The obvious answer is infrastructure. Power grids, communication networks, maybe even non-lethal defenses that protect districts without becoming new arenas. And here's the real question. Does he spend his days dismantling surveillance systems he once admired, or quietly archiving them just in case? The reason this matters is that BT embodies the thin line between safety and control. In a world traumatized by the games, overprotecting people can start to feel uncomfortably familiar. And then there's Enobaria, the wild card. She's spared execution, which tells you Coin's successors understand something Snow did too. Some victors are too politically loaded to kill. But what do you do with a career tribute whose teeth were sharpened into fangs on purpose, who defected to the rebels mostly because it was her best survival move? She's probably monitored constantly, her travel restricted, every conversation noted. Does she adapt, finding a new role training district security? Does she resist quietly, nurturing the old District 2 pride in back rooms? Or does she simply survive, drifting through a system that doesn't quite trust her and that she doesn't quite believe in? All of these threads point to the same uncomfortable truth. Even in a better Panem, there is no clean blueprint for what to do with people who were turned into weapons as children. You can give them houses instead of arenas, stipends instead of sponsors, and still be left with the same core question we're going to cover in the next section. How do you build a just society when your founding citizens are all carrying the games inside their heads? Did the new Panem really end the Hunger Games, or just rename them? So when the war ends and the arenas come down, you finally get what everyone said they wanted. No more Hunger Games. But here's the real question. Did the new Panem actually end the games, or just change the set dressing? This is where we talk about that symbolic final games proposal. Coin sits those surviving victors down and calmly suggests sending capital children into an arena as payback. At face value, it sounds like justice. You suffered, now their kids will suffer. But listen to the structure. A reapings list, a limited pool of names, a vote. The mechanics are the same. The new leadership reaches for the exact tool that broke the old world and just swaps which children count. That part matters because of who's in the room. These are the people who know, better than anyone in any district, what the arena really is. And most of them still say yes. Why? Trauma. Revenge. Fear that if they say no, they'll lose what little power they've clawed back. The relationship between power and pain hasn't changed yet. It's just wearing rebel grey instead of capital gold. Katniss's yes is the most disturbing of all. On paper, it makes her look compromised, even cruel. But when you track her inner logic, it's a tactical vote. She needs Coin to trust her, to stand in the perfect execution line of sight. Saying no might expose her. Saying yes gets her close enough to put an arrow through Coin instead of Snow. A decision is a weapon, not a belief. And that tells you everything about her faith in the new system. She doesn't trust a vote. She doesn't trust tribunals. She trusts one arrow, one moment, one assassination to stop a second generation of games before they harden into law. If your supposed symbol of hope thinks the only safeguard is murder, how stable is your new republic really? But even if Coin dies and the final games die with her, here's the next question. Does the new Panem actually stop creating victors? Not arena victors. Narrative victors. War heroes. Martyrs. Symbols whose stories get polished and replayed until their real trauma disappears under the propaganda cut. You can already see the temptation. Turn Katniss into the sanitized Mockingjay for school lessons. Turn Finnick into the handsome hero who died for freedom, not the abused teenager sold to capital elites. There is a lot to uncover here about why every government wants clean stories more than messy truths. Even the physical spaces are a test. What do you do with Victor's Village now? Museum of the Games? Affordable housing? Or just let those perfect houses rot at the edge of town, so every kid in District 12 walks past a ghost subdivision that says, "This happened, but don't ask too many questions." However you repurpose it, you're deciding whether victors stay as mornings, trophies, or neighbors. So maybe the real test of this new Panem isn't whether the arenas are gone, it's whether the world can stop needing people like Katniss and Finnick at all. And that raises one more problem we haven't touched yet. What happens to the victors who survive into this so-called peace, when the games are over but their usefulness isn't? Every victor, one pattern, the illusion of choice. So when the cameras cut away and the war banners come down, what are you left with? A pattern. From Lucy Gray's songs to Finnick's secrets, from Haymitch's drunken defiance to Katniss's open rebellion, every victor's story looks different on the surface. You have the unnamed morphlings who dissolve into addiction, the polished career champions from Districts 1, 2, and 4, the quiet minds like BT and Wires. At face value, it feels chaotic, random. But here's the real question. Why do all those wildly different lives keep landing in the same trap? Because every victor is offered the same deal. The Capitol hands you a script. Play along. Perform. Be the songbird, be the heartthrob, be the tragic survivor who smiles on cue. Lucy Gray is rewarded as long as her music sells the games. Finnick is adored as long as his body and charm are for sale. Haymitch is tolerated as long as he's the drunk joke on the couch. The second they step outside that role, the knife appears, just off camera. This is where we talk about Victor's Village as the stage for that illusion of choice. On paper, it's freedom, a mansion, hot water, food you don't have to hunt, exemption from the reaping. It looks like you escaped the games. But that part matters because the house is never just a house. It comes with mentoring duties, mandatory tours, direct lines to Snow's office, and surprise visits from Capital friends. Your front door is basically a revolving camera lens. Think about the relationship between the mansion and the district. The village is always set apart, elevated literally above the people whose deaths paid for it. Children can see the promise of comfort, but they can't touch it. And the victor has to look down at the poverty they left behind, knowing the only reason they're warm is because someone else's kid died in the arena. Is that freedom? Or is that leverage? Still, some victors push back. Finnick uses the very interviews meant to objectify him to smuggle information and eventually expose Capital clients. Johanna refuses to be pretty on cue and pays for it with torture and memory loss. Haymitch turns his forced mentoring into a long, slow sabotage campaign. Katniss weaponizes the role of girl on fire until the costume becomes a battle uniform. We're going to cover how each of these choices chips away at Snow's control, but notice the pattern. Any attempt to reclaim agency is met with immediate, brutal correction. And that's why the victors end up as the clearest mirror of Panem itself. The Capital insists you're free, while holding a knife to your throat, just out of frame. You can sing, flirt, drink, decorate your perfect kitchen in Victor's Village. You can even believe for a while that you chose this. But the moment you stop playing your part, the games start again. So if victory is just another arena with better furniture, what does real freedom even look like in Panem? To answer that, we have to go back to the beginning and walk through every victor's story in order. The victor's crown revisited. Would you take it? So if victory is just another arena with better furniture, what does that crown really weigh when it finally touches your head? You go back to the image from the beginning, the polished victor's crown, the laurel from the capital stage, Finnick's coil of rope, wrapped and unwrapped until the fibers fray. Katniss's mocking J-pin, small enough to hide in your fist. At face value, these are trophies. Proof you beat the games. Evidence you're one of the lucky ones. But here's the real question. After everything we've walked through with every victor, would you still reach for it? Picture it, step by step. Your name is reaped. Or worse, someone you love is reaped, and you hear yourself volunteer before you even understand why. You survive 23 deaths, mutts, poison fire, Snow's rose-scented breath in the back of your mind. Then you're on that train home, cameras in your face, and the promise is waiting. A house in Victor's village, a crown on your head, your district fed for a year. So you stand on the platform, the crowd screams. Effie or some other escort is beaming. The crown is right there, cold metal, bright lights, the capital anthem swelling. What does it feel like now, knowing what comes next? Knowing the relationship between that crown and the phone that will never stop ringing from the capital. Knowing the reason Hamish drinks, the reason Finnick never drops that rope, the reason Johanna flinches at running water. This is where we talk about the fantasy of winning versus the reality of being a victor. On paper, you get safety, wealth, status. No more reaping for you. No more coal dust or fish guts or logging accidents. Kids in your district grow up pointing at your house on the hill, saying your name with a mix of fear and hope. There is a lot to uncover here, because that part matters. You become the proof that the games work. But inside the house, the games don't end. They just change costume. You mentor children who will probably die. You smile through propaganda tours. If you're valuable enough, the capital sells your body as casually as they sold your image. You're a weapon when they need inspiration, a warning when they need fear. And when Snow decides you're inconvenient, he rewrites the rules and throws you back into the arena, quarter quell style, just to remind every district that the crown never meant freedom. So what's the real win in a system built on that kind of reward? In Panem, the only people who come close to winning are the ones who make the crown meaningless. Mags walking silently into the fog, Cedar and Chaff choosing rebellion over comfort. Finnick dying in the tunnels so the truth about Snow can surface. Katniss turning the symbol of victory into a weapon against the games themselves. And here's the uncomfortable echo. Panem keeps its victors visible and its costs invisible. Our world has its own versions of crowns, its own victors' villages, its own promises that look generous until you ask who pays the price. So when you imagine that crown on your head, that empty house waiting at the edge of your district, you have to ask yourself one more question. Would you rather win the games or help end the need for victors at all? If you lived in Panem, what kind of victor would you be? So if you were dropped into Panem tomorrow, which crown would you actually end up wearing? Not the fantasy version, the one the capital would design for you. Here's the real question. Are you a District 2 career raised on obstacle courses and sword drills? The kid everyone expects to volunteer the second you turn 18. You grow up walking past the victor's village every day, memorizing the names on the plaques, telling yourself you'll be the one who finally makes your district proud. Or are you more of a District 3 quiet genius, the Beatty type who doesn't stand out in training but is running probability trees in your head while the careers are throwing spears? Maybe you're District 12, a reluctant hunter, closer to Katniss or even a less drunk Hamish. You don't train for the games, you train to not starve. Your relationship to the reaping is pure dread, not ambition. Or you're from one of those mid-tier districts that the story barely follows. Textiles, grain, maybe power. You're not a symbol, you're not a threat. You're just there until your name comes out and and suddenly survival becomes your only talent. At face value, all four paths sound completely different. Career, genius, reluctant hunter, background tribute. But that part matters, because every single one of those types was built on purpose. The capital needs District 1 and 2 to worship the games. It needs District 3 to provide clever outliers for twists. It needs 12 to show desperation. And it needs those mid-tier districts to fill the arena with bodies who can be edited into whatever story Snow wants. So pick one. Which district are you claiming in the comments? And what kind of victor do you think you'd be? The Finnick O'Dare Golden Boy from 4, weaponized through charm. The Johanna Mason who pretends to be weak until it's too late. The Wyress or Beatty type who wins by understanding the arena better than the game makers. There is a lot to uncover here about why certain personalities survive and others are never meant to. Then we push it further. You've won. The train takes you to the capital. The crown goes on your head. What happens when the cameras turn off? Do you play the capital's game? Smile through the victory tour, accept the private parties the way Finnick was forced to? Do you retreat into Haymitch's path, numbing everything with alcohol, or morphling until mentoring becomes just another punishment? Or are you the Johanna who quietly joins the rebellion and pays for it with torture and memory loss? Maybe you'd try to disappear into Victor's village, planting your own version of Katniss and Peter's herb book, pretending the games are behind you while every autumn the train brings 2 more children to your door. This is where we talk about constraint. Every choice you think you're making is already inside a box Snow built. Even rebellion is part of the spectacle until it isn't. We're going to cover those boxes in detail, district by district, victor by victor. So before we break them down, ask yourself one more thing. If you know what kind of victor you'd be, are you sure you'd survive what comes next? Where we go next, the missing games, the missing names. If every choice is inside a box, then here's the real question. What about the boxes we never even see? We talk about victors as if the record is complete. Katniss, Peter, Finnick, Johanna, Haymitch, Lucy Gray if you go all the way back. But there is a lot to uncover here, because the timeline of the games is full of missing years, missing names, and missing victories that still shape what you do see on screen. Start at the beginning, the 1st through 9th Hunger Games, before Snow's reforms ever make the arena aspirational. No sponsors, no Victor's Village, no career academies with gemstone weapons and spa days. Who survives those early games? And what kind of victor do you even become when the capital hasn't figured out the promise of hope yet? Back then, sending you home with nothing might have been the point. So why the change? Then jump forward to the 50th, the second quarter quell. We know Haymitch. We know the force field twist. We know it terrifies Snow so much, he redesigns the entire arena system. But 23 other tributes die there, which means there are 23 other districts that don't get a victor, and 11 that do across the rest of the timeline. We never get a full roster of who those victors are. That part matters because those are the mentors training Katniss's generation. Somewhere in that gap are the unnamed District 1 and 2 champions who teach Glimmer, Marvel, Cato, and Clove how to hunt people for sport. And what about BT? We only see his quarter quell, but he's already a victor, already a weapon the capital tried to turn into a symbol of District 3's innovation. What arena did he win in? How did someone who thinks in circuits and fail-safes beat a bloodbath that favors spears and swords? This is where we talk about an entire games you never see, but whose outcome rewires the rebellion. So here's what we're going to cover going forward. Imagine a full speculative reconstruction of the second quarter quell, tribute by tribute, district by district, using what we know about Snow's fear of outsmarted arenas. Or a Victor's Village tour series, how District 4's seaside mansions feel different from District 11's guarded orchards, or what an empty District 2 village says about a place that turns children into soldiers and then runs out of wars. And then there's the strangest group of all, the post-war generations. Kids who grow up in Panem with no reaping, no arena, no televised slaughter to anchor their calendar. Victors who live long enough to see children in their district never pulled on stage. What kind of relationship do they have to the word victor when the games are history instead of threat? The canon gives you fragments, rules, politics, a few names. But if you read between those lines, there are dozens of victors whose stories can be partially reconstructed from who mentors whom, which ones stay silent. So I want you to help fill those gaps. Which missing victor do you want us to dig into? Early career legends from 1 and 2? BT's first arena? The nameless District 9 who maybe never existed because they never won? Tell us which era you want explored, and we'll treat this channel as an ongoing archive of Panem's lost stories, not just recap content. Because the games didn't just produce 75 winners, they produced an entire hidden generation, and we're only just starting to find them. Your seat in our Victor's Village. Subscribe, stay alive. So if we're building this ongoing archive of victors, where do you fit into it? Think of the channel as our own heavily decapitalized version of Victor's Village. At face value, it's just videos about the Hunger Games, right? But here's the real question. Why keep coming back to the same arenas, the same districts, the same handful of victors the capital chose to spotlight, when there is a lot to uncover here that never made it into the broadcasts? This is where we talk about everything they'd rather frame as a montage. We're going to cover the politics of Snow turning Lucy Gray's tragedy into a template for romance. Propaganda. The way Haymitch's force field trick rewires the entire relationship between victors and the capital, and why Finnick's talent is actually a weapon the capital used on him. The promise of this channel is simple. If the games touched it, we're going to pull it apart. On the surface, hitting that subscribe button is just a YouTube thing. But imagine it as moving into a safer Victor's Village. No peacekeepers at the edge of the cul-de-sac. No cameras waiting for you to break. Just a row of houses where every victor's story can actually be told from their point of view, not Snow's Edit Bay. You get a permanent seat in a district that runs on curiosity instead of fear. And the property tax here isn't money, it's engagement. You drop your theories in the comments, the way Katniss and Peter filled that plant book in District 12's village, trading knowledge to stay alive. You vote on which victor or district we move into next. Do we spend a week in District 4's sea-salted village with Finnick and Annie? Or walk the empty streets of 12's abandoned houses after the bombing, where only the Mockingjays are listening? Sharing a video with another Hunger Games nerd in your life is basically escorting them past the fence. You're saying, the capital's version of these people isn't enough for me. I want the messy, contradictory, traumatized, clever, sometimes cruel reality. That part matters because once you start seeing every hero segment as a negotiation between survival and propaganda, you can't unsee it anywhere else in Panem either. And the more of us who move into this metaphorical village, the less control the capital has over the narrative. We get to ask why a district would celebrate a victor whose win cost them half their Tesserae children. We get to question whether the promise of safety was ever real, or just another arena wall painted to look like a horizon. So if you want to keep exploring the off-camera years, the addiction, the mentoring, the quiet alliances over capital champagne, claim your seat here. Stay in this story with us. Because before you go, there's one more thing I want you to remember about every single victor we've talked about tonight. Remember the names, why the victors' stories matter, that they are not just footnotes in Katniss Everdeen's biography. Because when you get to the end of Mockingjay, Katniss sits down with that book of memories, names, drawings, stories, little fragments of people the Capitol tried to turn into statistics. This is where we talk about why that matters. Why write it all down when the war is over and the cameras are gone? Here's the real question. What happens to a country that forgets it's dead? The Capitol's answer is simple. You don't. You just rename them. You turn them into trading cards, glossy victor portraits, replay packages before each new games. You remember the costume, the kill shot, the kiss. You forget the person. So what we've done in this video is a smaller, messier version of Katniss's book. We're going to cover Finnick not as the Capitol's golden boy, but as the kid from District 4 who was sold to Snow's friends. We're going to cover Johanna not as the angry axe girl, but as the woman who watched her family executed because she wouldn't play nice. At face value, they're fan favorites. Underneath, they're case studies in what the system does to a victor. And it's not just the ones the narrative spotlights. Think about Haymitch, drinking alone in a rotting house while the rest of Victor's village in 12 stands empty. Think about the Morphlings from 6, who traded one form of capital control for another and still died trying to shield Peter and Beatty. Think about the unnamed early champions from the first decades, when the arenas were cruder but the rules were already the same. Win, and your suffering becomes a product. That part matters because it kills the myth of a clean win. There is no version of these games where you step off the train a whole person and stay that way. There are only degrees of survival, resistance, and damage. Some victors bend toward the Capitol, some bend toward rebellion. All of them break somewhere. So here's my question for you. Which names are you going to carry out of this? Finnick, who weaponizes charm and then dies in the tunnels. Johanna, who refuses to be pretty for them ever again. Beatty and Wyrus, turning intellect into sabotage. Even Lucy Gray, half legend, half girl, haunting the edges of Snow's origin story. There is a lot to uncover here if you refuse to let them blur together. If Katniss has her book, this channel is our version. A refusal to let the Capitol's edit be the final cut. A reminder that every crown in Victor's village was welded out of someone else's bones. So remember their names. Question every promise of easy victory. Hold on to the parts of their stories that made you uncomfortable. Stay alive, and may the odds be in your favor, and may you never have to wear that crown.